They hid my illness, sold my house, so I sued for $100,000. They hid my diagnosis and sold my house while I could barely stand. But I have no intention of giving up, and now they will have to answer for it. It hit me suddenly on a cool autumn day. At first, I tried to dismiss it as ordinary fatigue. The recent weeks had indeed been difficult, and my body was demanding a break. But by evening, the weakness had intensified. Every movement was an effort, the dizziness grew stronger, and my appetite vanished completely. I realized I couldn't put off a doctor's visit any longer, though deep down, I had no idea how much this day would turn my life upside down. The children insisted on coming with me. "Mom, don't put it off, let's go together," my daughter said, smiling. But there was something strange, anxious, flickering in her eyes, and a chill ran down my spine. I tried to attribute it to my own paranoia, to exhaustion and worry, but an inner voice whispered that the situation was far more complex. When we arrived at the hospital, I immediately sensed a strange tension in the air. The children seemed to automatically take control of everything around them. The receptionists answered their questions more quickly, the nurses nodded at them, and my own attempts to inquire about the procedure were met with slight, almost imperceptible obstruction. They constantly intercepted my questions, interrupted me, whispered to each other so that I could barely grasp what was being said. Every glance, every gesture from them sparked anxiety in me. It seemed they were hiding something, and I didn't know how to find out what. My heart tightened with confusion, but I still hoped it was just worry and misunderstanding. When I was called into the doctor's office, I tried to take the initiative. "Are my test results ready? May I see them?" I asked calmly, trying not to show my inner turmoil. But my daughter immediately intervened. "Mom, everything's fine, don't worry," she smiled, placing a hand on my shoulder. Her gesture, seemingly protective, actually sent a strange cold shiver down my back. It was as if her concern wasn't for me, but to conceal something important. The office was quiet, broken only by the monotonous hum of the computer and the rustle of paper. The doctor looked wary but didn't speak directly, as if he was waiting for something. The children, however, seemed completely absorbed in their game of control, exchanged glances, nods, quiet whispers. It all fueled a growing dread within me. I realized they were hiding something vital. My heart began to beat faster, and anxious thoughts swirled in my head. Why are they being so overprotective? What are they trying to hide? Inside, I was torn between a desire to trust and a feeling of betrayal. Every one of their gestures seemed carefully calculated, aimed at controlling the situation and depriving me of the right to information about my own health. In the hallway, I noticed documents on a desk. The envelopes with my test results, which should have been in my hands, had suddenly vanished. A nurse was whispering something to my daughter, who nodded, and I understood. They were acting secretly, right before my eyes. I felt a sense of injustice, betrayal, and helplessness growing inside me. It was as if I were being kept in the dark, stripped of any ability to act for myself. After that shocking visit to the hospital, I tried to calm down. I'm probably just being paranoid, I thought, convincing myself that the children were just being overly protective, that my imagination was running wild from exhaustion and anxiety. I replayed their words, recalled every gesture, trying to find a rational explanation. Maybe it really was concern, not hidden motives? I tried to focus on ordinary household chores, on cooking, on small errands, just to keep my mind somewhat steady. A week passed, and gradually I began to believe this version of events. Every morning I woke up thinking that perhaps it was all just the fears of an aging heart, that the children simply loved me and wanted to protect me. I tried to pretend everything was fine, but a slight anxiety still lived inside me, like a small pebble stuck in my chest, making it hard to breathe calmly. But everything changed at the most unexpected moment. I went to the local store for ordinary groceries: bread, milk, fruit. The store was almost empty. The autumn light fell through the glass windows and faintly illuminated the shelves. I was selecting apples when I heard a familiar voice that made me start. "Good afternoon." I turned and saw my doctor. His gaze immediately noticed something strange in my condition: the fatigue, the pallor, the slight tremor in my hands. He approached quietly, almost in a whisper, as if afraid someone nearby might hear. "Are you going to chemotherapy? Have you started treatment?" I froze. My heart sank, and a lump formed in my throat. "What do you mean?" I asked cautiously, trying not to betray the shock that pierced me through. My voice trembled, though I tried to speak calmly. The doctor looked at me slowly, and his words hit harder than any physical blow. "You have cancer, and the sooner you start treatment, the better your chances of a successful outcome. Why haven't you started yet?" I was in complete shock. Thoughts swirled in my head like a whirlwind. My own children hid this from me. They knew I was terminally ill, and they were trying to sell my house at the same time. My brain refused to accept this reality. My heart beat faster. My breathing became ragged. Inside, a mix of hurt, anger, confusion, and despair churned. I could barely gather my thoughts. The doctor, seeing my state, lowered his gaze and added quietly with concern, "It's terrible that your children would do this. You need a lawyer to protect yourself and your assets." His words sounded like a verdict, but at the same time offered hope. There was a way to defend myself, a chance to regain control. I took a deep breath, trying not to show my inner shock. Outwardly, I remained calm, smiling, even joking about how expensive the apples were. But inside, a resolve to act was boiling. I understood that an open confrontation right now would be too dangerous. The children might sense my suspicions immediately and accelerate their dirty plans. Right after that, I began to act quietly but decisively. The first step was to hire private investigators and a lawyer, the irony being that my own doctor had suggested it. The investigators started monitoring the children's every move, recording phone calls, tracking meetings and transactions, documenting any attempts to sell the house or move documents to hide assets. The lawyer began gathering all the legal papers, checking the will, the property deeds, preparing a strategy to file in court to secure my house and possessions. At the same time, I started a course of chemotherapy. Every visit to the clinic was carefully planned so the children wouldn't find out about the treatment. I scheduled the procedures for times that coincided with their commitments or when they were out of the house. Each time I left the hospital after another session, I felt mixed emotions, fatigue and pain, but also a surge of strength and determination. Every drop of medication entering my vein was like a symbol of my inner fight. I was no longer helpless. I meticulously hid my treatment, pretending to be weak, sometimes forgetful, sometimes laughing about small everyday things, so the children wouldn't suspect I knew too much. But inside, an understanding was growing. I now had a plan. I would act covertly, gather evidence, protect my assets and my health, and most importantly, show my children that you cannot deceive and betray your mother. Every day was filled with tension. I watched them, studied their habits, tried not to reveal that I knew their secrets. My mind worked like clockwork. I had to keep a calm face while simultaneously gathering all the threads that would lead to the truth. Sometimes I imagined their surprise when they found out I had known everything all along. Sometimes, what it would feel like when justice was served and all the evidence was in my lawyer's hands. It was at that moment I understood. The conflict was only just beginning. What was at stake wasn't just money or property, but my life, my justice, and my pride. And now I was ready to act quietly, but resolutely. I felt a surge of inner strength that helped me endure the chemo, the stress, and the fear. I knew one thing. This wasn't the end, only the beginning, and I would emerge from this fight victorious, no matter what. Several weeks had passed since that shocking day in the store when I first learned the truth about my diagnosis. All the evidence of the children's actions was gradually forming a complete picture. Correspondences, recorded phone calls, investigators' notes, and the documents they had tried to forge. Each new piece of evidence added to my confidence and inner strength. I was still undergoing chemotherapy, meticulously hiding it from the children, pretending I knew nothing and that they were still protecting me from unnecessary worry. But inside, a resolve burned. I was preparing for the day I could act openly, and each day I was laying the groundwork for future justice. One sunny but cool day, just as I was returning from another visit to the clinic, the doorbell rang. On the doorstep stood a young real estate agent with a folder of documents and a serious expression. Something tightened inside me. I knew this was the day that would reveal how far my children had gone. My daughter, hearing the bell, first tried to brush it off. "I don't know who that is, Mom. Probably someone who came by mistake," she said, nodding to the agent and smiling as if to hide her fear. But her eyes betrayed anxiety, and her hands trembled slightly as she tried to conceal some papers. A few seconds later, her mask fell. She abruptly changed her tone. Her voice became cold and decisive. "I don't care anyway. I want to sell the house. You're too old to make any decisions for yourself, Mom." My heart constricted, and a mix of hurt, anger, and shock boiled within me. I stood quietly, trying not to give the slightest sign that I knew about the betrayal, the secret sale, the illness, that everything had already been uncovered. But internally I understood. This moment was the climax, when the children thought they had won, while I was still operating in secret. Restrained almost quietly, I asked, "And where would I go?" My voice was even, but an inner tremor betrayed the pain and confusion. My daughter, not losing her self-assurance, replied with cold, soulless precision. "To a retirement home, Mom. You can't decide anything anyway." She didn't say a word about my illness, that it was terminal, or that they had tried to hide it to speed up the sale of the house. Their coldness and cynicism cut deeper than any words. I felt my resolve hardening. Outwardly, I remained calm, nodded, smiled a weak, almost crooked smile, and pretended to accept their words. "All right," I said softly, allowing my daughter to believe she had gotten her way. But inside, plans were boiling. This wasn't the end, but a signal for active measures. Immediately after they left, I took out my phone and dialed the investigators. My voice was calm, level, but every phrase was an order. "We need to finalize the evidence collection this week. Their every action must be documented. There's no time to delay." The investigators confirmed that almost all the evidence was gathered, and only the final key details remained: signatures, the final transactions, and calls. Simultaneously, I called my lawyer. "We are filing the lawsuit. We cannot delay," I said calmly, though my heart was beating faster than usual. I understood that only legal force could stop their unlawful actions. The lawyer confirmed that the plan of action was ready, and as soon as all the evidence was compiled, they could file the claim and freeze any transactions involving the house. Inside me, a sense of victory and confidence was growing. The months of hidden treatment were almost over. The doctor's prognoses were favorable, and the chances of a full recovery had increased significantly. I felt a surge of strength and inner freedom. Now I had not only the legal but also the physical readiness for the fight. My every move was calculated. I continued going to chemotherapy, carefully hiding the visits from the children. Sometimes I pretended to be forgetful, sometimes weak and confused, to maintain the illusion of helplessness. But their every action, every attempt at manipulation, every cold phrase from my daughter and son was being recorded and added to the evidence file. I knew, they thought they had won, but in reality, their confidence was their weakness. I was gathering the facts, documenting their lies, betrayal, and theft, and each new day brought closer the moment when I could strike precisely, without unnecessary noise, quietly but definitively. A mix of emotions churned inside me: anger, hurt, cold calculation, but also a surprising pride in myself. I was ready for the final move. And every time I returned from a chemotherapy session, I felt a surge of strength and confidence. My body was fighting for life, and my mind was fighting for justice. I looked at the house they were so eager to take away and understood. The truth would prevail soon. And though outwardly I remained quiet and submissive, inside me a feeling of triumph was maturing. They thought they controlled the situation, that I was too weak and too sick to do anything. But the reality was different. The strength was within me, and it remained hidden until every piece of their betrayal was documented on paper and in recordings. I knew that in a week everything would be ready. The evidence compiled, the lawyer prepared to file the lawsuit, the treatment nearly complete. In that moment, I felt for the first time that control had returned to me. I was once again the master of my life, my home, and my destiny. And most importantly, this time I was playing by my own rules, quietly, wisely, and mercilessly, while they thought they had won. The morning was grey and cool, with a light drizzle of rain, when the mailman brought the long-awaited notification. The envelope with the official court seal lay on my table. My heart clenched as I read it. A summons for the children, for a hearing on charges of fraud, endangerment of life, and the attempt to deprive me of my home. Each word filled me with both anxiety and relief. Anxiety because the matter had reached the court, and relief because the truth had finally received legal recognition. I understood it was dangerous to stay at home right then. The children might try to interfere, intimidate me, or accelerate their dirty plans. So, for the duration of the court proceedings, I rented a small, cozy hotel nearby. The room inside was simple but comfortable. A small table with a lamp, a wide armchair by the window, and a view of the wet street where passers-by hurried about their business. Here I could be safe, focus on preparation, and maintain my emotional balance. I prepared meticulously for the court hearing. My lawyer advised me on strategies. The investigators provided detailed records of all the children's conversations and actions. The documents were gathered. All the evidence, from correspondence to forged signatures, confirmed their fraudulent actions. We sought compensation of $100,000 for the threat to my life and health, for the psychological pressure, and for the deliberate concealment of my diagnosis, which could have cost me my life. Finally, the day of the hearing arrived. I came early, took a comfortable seat by the window, and let my lawyer prepare the papers nearby. I watched as the children entered the hall. My son sat quietly, hiding his face in his hands as if hoping invisibility would protect him from the truth. His shoulders were hunched, his eyes hidden behind his fingers, and his lips trembled with tension. My daughter entered with a completely different energy. Loud, self-assured, her eyes full of anger and resentment. She shouted as she sat down. "You've ruined our lives. We've lost so much time and opportunity, and you, old woman, will die soon anyway, while we have to go on living." I felt tears welling up. The pain of the betrayal was deep, but I understood. This moment was proof that my plan had worked. I allowed myself to cry quietly, but didn't show it. My lawyer supported my strategy of calmness. Every document, every recording, every detail showed how the children had tried to deceive me, hide my diagnosis, and sell the house while I was sick and vulnerable. The judge listened attentively to both sides. My daughter continued to shout, trying to influence the court's opinion, while my son just sat silently, wringing his hands. The lawyer read out the evidence one by one. Audio recordings of phone calls, facts of document forgery, testimony from the real estate agent, and confirmation that I had undergone treatment in secret, fearing the children's interference. When the judge finished the hearing, he looked at the children. The court takes into account the evidence presented. The actions aimed at fraud and the concealment of vital information are deemed unlawful. The house remains with the plaintiff, and the defendants are ordered to pay compensation in the amount of $100,000. In that moment, I felt a strange, almost unreal sense of relief. All this time, I had remained calm and acted covertly, patiently gathering evidence, and now the law was on my side. The children stared at me in shock. My son continued to hide his face, and my daughter, stripped of her self-assurance, fell silent. The understanding that their cunning had been exposed and punished was evident on their faces. I allowed myself a faint smile. The tears still rolling down my cheeks were not from sorrow, but from happiness. The happiness that it had worked, that my resolve and hidden strategy had led to a just outcome. The house remained mine. The compensation confirmed that the attempt to deprive me of my property and control over my life had failed, and the moral victory was mine. That day, I felt a complete catharsis for the first time. The children's betrayal had been acknowledged, the threat eliminated, justice had prevailed. I was protected legally, morally, and emotionally. Though tears still fell, they were tears of triumph, the tears of a woman who had managed to survive shock, illness, and betrayal, and emerge victorious. When the hearing ended, I stood up quietly, gathered my things, and left the hall. Outside, the rain had stopped, and for the first time, the sun broke through the clouds, illuminating the street with a soft light. That light seemed like a symbol of a new beginning, of freedom, and of regaining control over my life. I knew there would still be a recovery period ahead after the illness, but now I was certain. No one would ever be able to take my home from me or try to deceive me again. It was over, and I was the victor, quiet, wise, and undefeated. After the court's decision, life seemed to gradually return to its normal course. The children were stunned by the outcome and, despite their indignation and shouting in the courtroom, were forced to comply with the law. They paid me the $100,000, compensation for the threat to my life, emotional distress, and fraud. That money became more than just a figure in an account. It was a symbol of justice, a sign that betrayal would not go unpunished. Furthermore, the court ruled that the children no longer had the right to live in the house I had safeguarded for so long. They were forcibly evicted, and the house remained mine for good. Every corner, every shelf, every object now reminded me not only of the past but also that I had managed to protect my space and my dignity. For the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of peace and control over my own life. Life slowly improved. I began to feel joy in ordinary things again. Morning coffee in the kitchen, books on my favorite shelf, the gentle sound of rain outside the window. In time, I met a man, attentive and kind, who understood my pain but did not judge or make demands. We spent evenings together, walked in the park, laughed over small things, and discussed plans for the future. Soon, we decided to marry. It was symbolic proof that even after betrayal and severe trials, one can find happiness and learn to trust again. Of course, sadness sometimes washed over me. There were moments when I felt the loneliness of being without the children, without those who had once been my flesh and blood. In those moments, my heart would constrict with pain and regret. But I understood. It was better to feel a slight melancholy away from betrayal than to live alongside those who had once tried to deprive me of my life and property. This choice brought an inner freedom and a peace that no amount of money could measure. Every morning I woke up grateful for my health. The treatment had been successful, the prognosis was favorable, and my body was gradually regaining its strength. I felt that I had not only protected myself physically and legally but also morally. I had proven that betrayal carries consequences, and that the ability to act wisely and quietly can sometimes be stronger than open confrontation. My home once again became a place of joy and warmth. My new husband and I did small repairs, decorated the rooms, cooked dinners, laughed, and enjoyed quiet evenings. The house was no longer a place of fear and tension. It had become a symbol of my triumph, strength, and resolve. Each day I reminded myself, the betrayers are gone, the truth has prevailed, and life goes on. Sometimes I would sit on the porch with a cup of tea, watch the sunset, and smile quietly. Yes, the past had left scars. The pain of betrayal would never fully disappear. But now I had a choice, peace, and confidence. I was alive, protected, and ahead lay days filled with new hopes, joy, and love. And that thought made me strong. And now, I want to ask you, dear readers, what would you have done in my place? Can children be forgiven after such a betrayal? Was it right to act quietly and wisely, or would open confrontation have been better? If you're interested in hearing more real stories from Reddit, full of dramatic twists and moral victories, subscribe to the channel. There are many more shocking and inspiring stories ahead that will make you empathize and rejoice alongside the heroes.